In this video, we are going to study about the optic nerve, the second cranial nerve. The optic nerve conveys the axons from the ganglionic cells of the retina. So when you see the functional components of the optic nerve, they carry the special somatic afferent fibers for vision, and they also carry the afferents for pupillary light and accommodation reflexes. What are the peculiarities of the optic nerve? The optic nerve is not a peripheral nerve but a prolongation of white matter of the brain, because the optic nerve is developed from the stalk of the optic vesicle. It is covered by three meninges of the brain with subdural and the subarachnoid spaces. Therefore, the nerve is likely to undergo atrophy in prolonged increase of cerebrospinal fluid pressure. The pile sheath carrying the blood vessels project into the substance of the nerve as numerous septae and divide it into about 800 to 1000 bundles of polygonal areas. This arrangement provides a rich blood supply to the nerve. The optic nerve is devoid of neurolemma sheath and endoneurium, and it is supported by the neuroglial cells. Myelination of the nerve is derived from the oligodendroglia, and due to the absence of neurolemma sheath and the endoneural tubes, the optic nerve cannot regenerate if damaged. Now we'll see the measurements of the optic nerve. So the total length of the optic nerve is 4 centimeters. So the parts of the optic nerve are intraorbital part. So this is the intraorbital part which is present within the orbit, which is about 25 millimeter, and the canalicular part within the optic canal, it is about 5 millimeter, and the intracranial part is 10 millimeter. So the total length of the optic nerve is 4 centimeters. When you see the course, the optic nerve begins at the optic disc or the blind spot, where the fibers of the stratum opticum converge and pierces the outer layers of the retina, choroid and the lamina cribrosa sclerae at the posterior part of the eyeball, about 3 millimeter to the nasal side of its posterior pole. During its passage through the tunics of the eye, it acquires the myelin sheath. The optic nerve passes backwards and medially through the posterior part of the orbital cavity and the optic canal and joins with the optic chiasma in the cranial cavity. So it consists of three parts: intraorbital part, intracanalicular part and intracranial part. Now we'll see about the intraorbital part. The nerve presents a sinus course so that the length of the nerve is about 6 millimeter more than the distance between the optic canal and the eyeball. This allows free movement of the eyeball without tension on the nerve. Next we'll see the relations. Posteriorly, it is surrounded by the 4 recti muscle. At the annulus of the tendinous, the origin of the superior and the medial rectus muscle, they are adherent to the dural sheath of the nerve. Therefore, in the retrobulbar neuritis, the elevation and the adduction of the eye may be painful. Anteriorly, it is separated from the cone of muscle by the quantity of orbital fat in which run the ciliary vessels and the nerves. Laterally, you have the ciliary ganglion. So this is a ciliary ganglion between the proximal part of the lateral rectus muscle and the optic nerve. Inframedially, the optic nerve is pierced by the central artery and the vein of the retina about 12 millimeter behind the eyeball. The vessels then run forward in the center of the nerve to the optic disc. In the initial phase of increased intracranial tension, the papilledema or choked disc is due to the retardation of the venous return. So in this picture you can see the structures related to the optic nerve. Posteriorly it is surrounded by the four recti muscle and the annulus fibrosus. Anteriorly it is separated from the muscles by the pad of fat and the ciliary nerves. And laterally you have the ciliary ganglion which intervenes between the optic nerve and the lateral rectus muscle. And here you can see this is the central artery of the retina which pierces the optic nerve inframedially. And above the optic nerve, so three structures crosses from lateral to medial side. One is this is the ophthalmic artery which crosses the optic nerve from lateral to medial side. The next one is the nasociliary nerve. So this is the nasociliary nerve which crosses from lateral to the medial side. And the third one is the superior ophthalmic vein. So three structures crosses the optic nerve above from lateral to medial side. They are nasociliary nerve, ophthalmic artery and the superior ophthalmic vein. And below you have the nerve to the medial rectus. So this is a nerve to the medial rectus which arises from the inferior division of the oculomotor nerve. Now we'll see the relations of the intracanalicular part. Infralaterally you have the ophthalmic artery. So this is ophthalmic artery which lies infralateral to the optic nerve, and medially it is related to the sphenoidal and the posterior ethmoidal as sinuses separated by a thin plate of bone. Inflammation from these sinuses may produce retrobulbar neuritis. The intracranial part extends from the optic canal to the optic chiasma. Now we'll see the relations of the intracranial part. So above, this is the optic nerve. Above it is related to the posterior part of the olfactory tract and the gyrus rectus and also the anterior cerebral artery. Intracranial part of the orbital nerve is related laterally to the internal carotid artery. Now we'll see the number of fibers of the optic nerve. About 1.2 million myelinated fibers are present in each human optic nerve. 92% of fibers are thinly myelinated with a diameter of about 1 micrometer, and the rest possess 2 to 10 micrometer diameters. Now we'll see the arrangement of the fibers just behind the eyeball. So here how the fibers are arranged. Laterally you have the macular fibers, and medially you have the superior nasal and the inferior nasal fibers. Above you have the superior temporal fibers, and below you have the inferior temporal fibers. In the middle you have the central artery of the retina. So this is the arrangement of the fibers in the optic nerve just behind the eyeball. Now we'll see the arrangement of the fibers behind the central vessel. So this is the central vessel. Behind the central vessel, how the fibers are arranged. In the center you have the macular fibers, and you have upper and the lateral quadrant you have the superior temporal fibers. Lower and the lateral quadrant you have the inferior temporal fibers. Upper and the medial quadrant you have the superior nasal fibers, and lower and the medial quadrant you have the inferior nasal fibers. So these are the arrangement of the fibers in the optic nerve just behind the central artery of the retina. Next, close to the optic chiasma. So how the fibers are arranged. So the fibers undergo 45-degree inward rotation. So the fibers will undergo 45-degree inward rotation. So center you have the macular fibers. Above you have the superior temporal fibers. Medially you have the superior nasal fibers. Below you have the inferior nasal fibers and laterally you have the inferior temporal fibers. So if you see here and here, the fibers has rotated 45-degree medially or inward rotation. Next we'll see about the blood supply of the optic nerve. The arteries are derived from two sources. From the plexus in the pial sheath, which is contributed by the superior hypophyseal artery, ophthalmic artery, posterior ciliary artery and the extraneural branches of the central artery. And from the intraneural branches of the central artery, and the venous drainage is by the central vein of the retina. Next we'll see the applied anatomy related to the optic nerve. The complete lesion of one optic nerve leads to the total blindness of this affected side, and then you have the loss of direct light reflex on the affected side and loss of consensual light reflex on the sound side. So this is also direct light reflex is also absent and the consensual light reflex on the sound side is also absent. But on the sound side you have the direct light reflex, and because of this the consensual light reflex on the affected side is be also present. Accommodation reflex remains unaffected. When a tumor affects the base of the frontal lobe, it may press upon the optic nerve and it is manifested by the optic atrophy on the affected side due to the pressure and choked disc on the sound side due to the increased intracranial tension. So this whole phenomena of optic atrophy on the affected side and the choke disc on the sound side is known as the Foster Kennedy syndrome. Now we'll see the principles of the visual pathway. The human eyes responds to the visual spectrum of 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer from blue to red. When you see the visual receptors, you have the rods and the cones. So they act as the photoreceptors. The rods, these are concerned with the dim vision and black and white vision, which is known as scotopic vision, and total number of rods in each human retina is about 120 million. The rods are more numerous at the ora serrata and absent at the fovea centralis. The cones, they collect information from the bright light and the color vision, which is photopic vision. The total number of cones in each eye is about 7 million, and cones are more numerous in the central part of the retina, and the fovea centralis contains cones only, numbering about 4,000. Next we'll see the neurons of the visual pathway. 3 sets of neurons convey the impulse from the rods and the cones. The first neurons are the bipolar cells. So these are the bipolar cells of the retina. The red one are the bipolar cells. They receive the impulses from the rods and the cones and they make synapse with the ganglionic cells. So these are the ganglionic cells in the inner part of the retina. In the periphery of the retina, one ganglionic cell is connected to about 300 rods and 10 cones. At the fovea centralis, one ganglionic cell is connected to one cone. The second neurons are formed by the ganglion cells of the retina. Their axons form the optic nerve, then the optic chiasma and then the optic tract. At the chiasma, the temporal fibers of the retina passes uncrossed. So these are the temporal fibers which passes uncrossed. Whereas the nasal fibers, they decussate in the optic chiasma and reaches the opposite side optic tract. Therefore, in one optic tract contains the temporal half of the same retina and the nasal half of the opposite side retina. The third neurons are formed by the cells of the 6 layers of the lateral geniculate body. The crossed fibers of the optic tract make synapses with the cells in the layer of 1, 4 and 6 and the uncrossed fibers with 2, 3 and 5. The axons of the third neuron project to the striate area or area number 17 through the optic radiation. The striate area. The striate area includes both the walls of the calcarine sulcus involving the cuneus and the lingual gyrus. The peripheral part of the retina. So this is the peripheral part of the retina, which is represented by the anterior part of the visual area. The upper quadrant, so this is the upper quadrant, which is represented in the upper wall and the lip, and the lower quadrant is represented in the lower wall and the lip. The macular part, so this is the macular part which is represented in the posterior part of the visual area, extending backward to the lunate sulcus. Now we'll see the visual path. The visual path or the optic pathway consists of optic nerve. So this is the optic nerve. Then you have optic chiasma. Then you have optic tract, and then you have the optic radiation. So this is the visual pathway. We have seen the optic nerve. Now we'll see the optic chiasma. When you see the optic chiasma, it is a flattened quadrilateral bundle of the nerve fibers which are situated at the junction of the floor and the anterior wall of the third ventricle. The anterolateral angle are continuous with the optic nerve, and the posterolateral angles are continuous with the optic tract. This is the sagittal section. So here you can see this is the optic chiasma. This is situated at the junction of the floor and the anterior wall of the third ventricle. And it flows in the cerebrospinal fluid between the third ventricle and the cisterna basalis. When you see the relations above, it is related to the lamina terminalis attached to the upper surface, and then it is related to the optic recess of the third ventricle and the anterior communicating artery. Below the optic chiasma, so you can see this is the diaphragma sella. Below the diaphragma sella you have the hypophysis cerebri. This is a picture of the base of the brain. So here you can see the optic nerve, and this is the optic chiasma, and this is the optic tract. So behind the optic chiasma you have the tuber cinerarium. So this is the tuber cinerarium and the infundibulum. Laterally you have the terminal part of the internal carotid artery and the anterior perforated substance. Now we'll see the fibers in the chiasma and their arrangement. In the chiasma, so this is optic chiasma, the fibers from the nasal half of, so this is the nasal half of the retina. So the nasal half of the retina, they cross in the midline and enter the opposite optic tract. The temporal fibers of each retina, however, enter uncrossed. So this is the picture. You can see this is the optic chiasma. The inferior nasal fibers, they cross along the anterior part of the optic chiasma and form a loop at the base of the opposite side optic nerve before joining the opposite side optic tract. Likewise, the superior nasal fibers make a loop in the anterior part of the ipsilateral optic tract, and then they cross along the posterior part of the optic chiasma before joining the opposite side optic tract. Such a loop of nasal fibers in the contralateral optic nerve and the ipsilateral optic tract is known as Willebrand's loop. Willebrand's loop. Now we'll see the arrangement of the fibers in the optic chiasma. So this is the arrangement picture to show the arrangement of the fibers in the optic chiasma. In the lateral part, so here you can see this is the lateral part. The lateral part consists of uncrossed fibers from the superior and the inferior temporal quadrants of the peripheral retina. And this is the central part. The macular and the paramacular fibers, so it occupy the 2/3 of the central area. Then you have the crossing of the superior nasal quadrants of the peripheral retina. Then you have the crossing of the inferior nasal quadrants of the peripheral retina, and behind you have the nasal fibers for the monocular fringe of binocular vision. Now we'll see about the optic tract. So this is the optic tract. Each tract passes backwards and laterally from the posterolateral angle of the optic chiasma between the tuberous cinerarium and the anterior perforated substance. It winds around the upper part of the basis pedunguli. So this is a basis pedunguli. So it winds around the upper part of the basis pedunguli. So here you can see this is the optic tract, which starts from the posterolateral angle of the optic chiasma. So it intervenes between the tuberous cinerarium and the anterior perforated substance and winds around the basis pedunguli. So this is the basis pedunguli. The optic tract, so this is the optic tract, they flatten out and they form a small medial root. So this is the medial root and the lateral root. The medial root comprises of the fibers of Guddens. So this is nothing but a commissure which connects the both medial geniculate body, which is present in the posterior part of the optic chiasma. Now we'll see about the lateral root. So this is the lateral root of the optic tract. So most of the fibers, they terminate in the cells of the lateral geniculate body. So this is the lateral geniculate body for the perception of the vision. Crossed fibers from the nasal part of the retina of the opposite side, they rely on the layers of 1, 4 and 6. Uncrossed fibers with the layers of 2, 3 and 5. Some fibers, they sweep medially below the pulvinar of the thalamus and terminate in the superior colliculus and the pretectal nucleus. So these are concerned with the pupillary light reflex and the reflex act of turning head and the eyes in pursuit of a moving object. A few fibers from the optic tract, they terminate in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, forming a retino-hypothalamic tract. These fibers are connected to pineal gland by a series of relay, and they mediate the influence of light and dark for the circadian rhythm. Now we'll see about the lateral geniculate body. So the lateral geniculate body, so this is the lateral geniculate body. It is a detached part of the thalamus and belongs to the metathalamus. It is an oval elevation below the lateral part of the pulvinar of the thalamus. So this is a pulvinar. So below the lateral part of the pulvinar of the thalamus, you have the lateral geniculate body. And this is connected to the superior colliculus. So this is the superior colliculus. So it is connected to the superior colliculus through the superior brachium. So this is the superior brachium which connects the lateral geniculate body with the superior colliculus. The geniculate body, so this is the geniculate body, this is a diagrammatic representation. So this geniculate body is a kidney shape which with the hilum which is directed ventrally. So the hilum of the lateral geniculate body is directed ventrally. The cells are arranged in 6 layers and they are numbered from hilum to the periphery. Now we'll see the arrangement of the retinal fibers in the lateral geniculate body. The medial part of the geniculate body receives the fibers from the upper quadrant. So these are the upper quadrant. So these fibers are present in the medial part. Whereas the lateral part receives the fibers from the lower quadrants, the green colors. So the lower quadrants are represented in the lateral part. And the macular fibers. So these are the macular fibers. So the macular fibers terminate in the large central zone which is wedged between the medial and the lateral part and occupies the dorso-caudal part of the geniculate body. Dorsal and the caudal part of the geniculate body. Now we'll see about the optic radiation. So these are the optic radiation. This is also known as the geniculocalcarine tract. Consists of fibers which extends from the lateral geniculate body and terminate into the visual cortex, the area number 17 or the striate area. The fibers, they sweep backwards through the retrolentiform part of the internal capsule, then along the lateral wall of the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle. So this is the lateral ventricle, posterior horn. Along the lateral wall of the posterior horn of the lateral ventricle, they pass through, and the fibers are arranged somatotopically. The macular fibers arising from the central part of the geniculate body, they occupy the center of the optic radiation and they terminate in the most posterior part of the visual cortex. So this is the macular fibers. The fibers carrying the information of the upper half of the retina, they arise from the medial part of the geniculate body and they occupy the upper part of the optic radiation and they terminate in the anterior part of the visual cortex above the calcarine sulcus. The fibers which arises from the lateral part of the geniculate body, this receives the impulses from the lower quadrant of the peripheral retina, and these fibers, they pass through the optic radiation and they end in the anterior part of the visual cortex below the calcarine sulcus. So the green color. So these fibers which arise from the lateral part of the geniculate body, they form a loop which loops forward in the temporal lobe along the roof and the lateral wall of the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. So this loop is known as the Meyer's loop. We have seen the applied anatomy related to the optic nerve before. Now we'll see the applied anatomy related to the other visual pathway. A midline lesion of the optic chiasma due to the pressure of the tumor of the pituitary may produce the bitemporal hemianopia due to the interruption of the nasal fibers, the cross nasal fibers of both retinae. Such defect is heteronymous. In early stage of hypophyseal growth, the inferior nasal quadrants are involved, producing the bitemporal upper quadrantic hemianopia. So involvement of the lateral part of the optic chiasma produces ipsilateral nasal hemianopia. Unilateral complete interruption of optic tract, lateral geniculate body or the optic radiation, they produce the contralateral homonymous hemianopia. So if the right side is affected, then the left half of the visual field is lost. If the pupillary light reflex is absent on the blind half of each retina, the lesion is located in the optic tract. When the light reflex is retained, the lesion is located beyond the geniculate body. The lesion of the pretectal nucleus produces Argel-Robertson pupil, in which there is a loss of light reflex but the accommodation reflex is retained. A partial lesion involving the visual cortex produces the upper or lower quadrantic homonymous hemianopia. In a lesion below the calcarine sulcus, the hemianopia is upper. When the lesion is above the calcarine sulcus, the hemianopia is lower. A lesion of the temporal lobe involving the Meyer's loop of optic radiation results in the upper quadrantic hemianopia. A lesion of the anterior part of the visual cortex. So, the anterior part of the visual cortex spares the macular fibers. So, here you can see the macular fibers vision is spared.